Good morning, everybody. Hello, welcome to our live natural health news show. Today, I am your hostess, Dr. Melissa Gallagher. And today in our video, we're going to talk about the state of the coronavirus here in the US and globally. I'm going to share surge news updates, information about where we stand currently, and what states, if you live in a state that is on the rise, which one is that? And as always, my goal is to provide you and your families tips and resources to keep you healthy and safe during this global pandemic. And today, I really want to talk to you about a nutrient. It's not a vitamin, it's actually a steroid that is synthesized by your own body, but sometimes we need to support it externally. We're going to talk a little bit about vitamin D, the role that plays. And so if you're curious about that particular dose or what dose to get, the role vitamin D plays in the immune state, I'm going to explain that thoroughly today. So definitely stick through to the middle part of our show. The way this live show works, if you are new and joining, welcome. Our live show is two parts. First half is news oriented, and it's specific to the current moment right now. So sometimes some of you might be watching us in January or February of 2021, and this might not be relevant, but you can fast forward, and there are show notes in the description box below when this is finally edited, where you can click on that detail. So I want to share a whole bunch of information with you this morning. I'm getting some info about Instagram. Let me see. Let me move it. I think I forgot to turn some of my studio lights on. I'm having a Monday. And Instagram was really having some difficulties with us on Friday. So go to YouTube. That seems to be always somewhat consistent for us. So welcome everybody. I want to share with you where we stand. The US hit 10 million cases of COVID. We continue to lead the world. I'm just going to kind of dig into we have a raging fire of COVID. I want to share with you some international numbers so you get perspective, because sometimes we get dulled down by the current state of COVID, and it might not seem as overwhelming and as intense because we're getting so used to this. So we're getting used to the fact that we are having 100,000 plus days now. So right now, the U.S. is at 10.06 million new cases, or total of 10.061 million cases. The world hit 50.493 million cases. And the next country that is after us in terms of leading the charge on COVID cases is India with 8.5 million. Next up is Brazil at 5.6 million. Then there's a big spread. The next country is Russia at 1.7. France and Spain have moved up a bit. France is at 1.7, Spain's at 1.3 million, respectively. Argentina is at 1.2 million, the UK is at 1.192 million, and Colombia is at 1.1 million. Those are all of the countries that have exceeded 1 million cases. Now here in the US, we had our first state exceed 1 million cases, and that is Texas. And I'll dig a little bit more into the state of Texas because it's very problematic for such a huge state, highly populated state. And it is 1/10 of the volume of COVID cases here in the US. We experienced yesterday 106,537 new positive cases. Saturday, we had 127,399 positive cases. Saturday's number was 3 times higher than any other country's totals for that day. We now have a total of 241,186 fatalities due to COVID. And we have a total currently of 42 out of 50 states that have an increase of 10% or more in their caseload. Our hospitalizations are up to over 56,000 cases. And this morning, I'm drinking coffee. So good. And I'm drinking I haven't pulled this out in a while. I lost the in. It's kind of funny. My quarantine caffeine and quarantine mug. This is available on Etsy if you want to grab that. I think the universe is telling me we're all in it for a long time. So the IN got washed away at one of our washings of this. Okay. So it is our state of COVID affairs has been described as a 4-alarm fire. There's been a lot of movement, as you guys are aware. If you following any type of news, even if you're not following news, you can see it on Facebook, Instagram. Everybody's talking about it. We now have a new president-elect, Joe Biden, and the first ever vice president-elect, Kamala Harris. Women have broken a big glass ceiling with her moving into that role as vice president. And today, that team, the Biden-Harris transition team, they are first task. They are setting forth their COVID task force. It's actually a COVID advisory board. That's what they're calling it. There will be a total of 12 members. I already have been able to get the scoop on some of these members. I think, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have 5 individuals that we know are going to be on this board, the COVID board. The difference here is that the board will have 2 co-chairs. So it's going to be kind of interesting in terms of there won't be one party that's leading everything. They're going to have shared co-chair responsibilities. The one co-chair is Dr. Vivek Murthy. Dr. Murthy was a previous U.S. Surgeon General. And then the other co-chair is Dr. David Kessler. In the 90s, he was an FDA commissioner. He currently is the chair for the Centers for Science and Public, let's see, I can't even read my own, in public institutions. That's the name of that group. The next individual that they have is Marcela Munoz Smith. She's a professor at Yale. We have Rick Bright. He had been on the Biomed Advancement Research and Development, I think it's the authorizing board. That's a federal agency. He was fired earlier this year, and so they're bringing him back to participate in that. And then we also have Luciana Bono. She specializes in complex public health emergencies. So I wanted to share with you those individuals. That is going to be front and center as we expect. And one of the things that I want to highlight is that we will probably start to see in January a whole bunch of new changes. There's discussions that the COVID advisory board, the Biden-Harris COVID advisory board, will be coordinating with the different. There's an association of governors that they will be hand in hand working with those governors as it is required to really lock down this virus. So I'm very encouraged already by the individuals on this task force. A lot of them I've done digging into who they are, what they represent, their CVs, their backgrounds. These are heavy players that know what they're doing, and they are scientifically, factually focused. They're not individuals that, are coming out of left field, like the current radiologist that's in charge of things and trying to employ herd immunity. So expect a whole bunch of changes as I get more information. Today is going to be a big day with details. I'll keep you all abreast of that. But obviously that doesn't, their group and their efforts really don't start until January. So on the flip side, the loser of the election is planning rallies, partly to fundraise because of the need for the legal thing of a lot of the legal stuff that's happening regarding voter counting and whatnot. The challenge here is that a lot of states are concerned. We already have data on the COVID spreading that occurred at multiple rallies that were hosted, where thousands of folks. And here in Georgia, you guys may or may not be aware, but we have a crazy situation where we have 2 U.S. Senate seats. Georgia has this weird situation where you have to hit a certain threshold, majority threshold, most of the time it doesn't occur. One of our races, the list of candidates, it was seriously like 18 people that were running from all different parties. And so we whittled it down. These two going to be 4 total candidates, 2 and 2. And Georgia's going to get crazy. One of the concerns a lot of folks I've been talking to over the weekend here in Georgia is that if there are these rallies, that's going to accelerate the COVID spread here in Georgia. And I do want to make a note, there's a lot of celebrating in the streets over the weekend, and those, even with masking, being in close proximity for 15 minutes or more, even outside, is risky. So just FYI on that. But we do know, we have a lot of data, at least 700 people have died due to presidential campaigning in-person rallies. And that was data I released, I think, last week. So let's move past that. I want to talk a little bit about some other things. Globally, the UK, we've got Wales coming off of the 3-week lockdown. We have England really locking down. We've got different parts of the UK starting to, Daisy's coming in. Hi, Daisy. There's going to be lockdowns happening, and they're starting to see a pre-Christmas dip in terms of spending of consumers, and they are anticipating there will be additional jobless claims and shops closing. And one of the things that we saw in the spring, they were kind of Italy, Spain, UK, it kind of followed suit, and then it came to the US. So we might see something like that occur. I'm not sure. But let me tell you some additional news. Okay, so in the States, we have Utah. The governor has issued an executive order, a state of emergency order in Utah. Now Utah is finally mandating masks all over the state. They're also limiting gatherings to the household members, and that's 8 or less. So limiting group gatherings. I didn't get a pulse on if school is going virtual. I know I follow a lot of folks and have some friends out in Utah, and I know schools opened a few weeks ago, and now they may be going back. I don't know those details. So if you're in Utah, let me know if any parents are out there. But the mask mandate and the state of emergency is going through the 23rd of November. In Illinois has posted 10,000 plus cases literally for 3 days in a row. So we've had over 30,000 new cases in the state of Illinois in a span of 3 days. Texas hit 1 million cases. They went in one day, they went from 990,930 cases. They've then added, it went up to 1,012,407. And they are seeing a lot of overwhelm in certain communities. El Paso still is dealing with COVID. Harris County still has COVID cases. Galveston's starting to tick up. So I will keep posting as I get details within that state. New York, this is really big. New York has had the highest COVID case day since May. This was yesterday. They posted over 3,600 new cases. New York's positivity percentage rate they've been always looking to go below 2, and they've kept it, below 1% and just hovering just above 1%. It moved up to over 2% over the weekend with the current caseload. They've had an increase in cases of 10%. The area that has the most, one of the things that I highlighted last month, New York's approach is kind of micro-targeting. There was a certain term that they had for it. I can't remember it right now, but it was very microscopic in terms of looking at boroughs and certain neighborhoods and blocks where they could identify where there were and are growing cases, and starting to employ special lockdowns or particular measures so that they don't have to lock down the whole entire state. or a city. So Staten Island right now is on the radar. That particular area, they have a positive percentage rate of 3%, and their hospitalization in just 24 hours jumped by 4%. So that's going to be red alert. Guarantee Andrew Cuomo is probably going to have, I think that's his name, Andrew Cuomo. The Governor Cuomo will probably have a whole bunch of tactics and methodologies and approach to deal with this, but definitely is something that is a concern. The other concern is that we still have that cross tri-state mingling where folks come in from Connecticut and New Jersey into the city for work. So that's really big. The other thing that we have going on is Pfizer. That is one of the ongoing trials. They're in a third stage of the trial right now, one of the COVID vaccines. It's a Pfizer and a BioNTech vaccine. So those two companies are together working on this. This vaccine has 2 doses. They're administered in a 28-day period of time. So, you go in, you get your dose, you get a booster on day 28. And what they're showing is that after that second dose, and it looks like it's a higher dose as well. That's one of the things they said, the other trials, they've got a dose and then the second dose is much stronger. After that second dose on day 28, what they're seeing is a protection is given to the individual after 7 days of the second dose. So you have also this basically what this looks like is the first set of results are in. They've highlighted the procedures, and at that 7-day mark, efficacy is 90%. That's really great. Now, let's also, be realistic. These trials are 30,000, 40,000 individuals. They are not massive, 100,000, 300,000 people trials. We won't, unfortunately, have that with this COVID vaccine. But currently, the FDA has requirements that as Pfizer gets through this first set of results, they have to put together a whole bunch of data. It gets submitted to the FDA. The FDA has a advisory body, external scientists, and they will evaluate whether they can move forward in producing this vaccine once they're done with that full process. They did release over the weekend that they are prepared to have 50 million vaccine doses available by the end of the year, should everything go as well. So they are mass producing. The manufacturing of these vaccines are currently happening, despite the fact that they still have these ongoing trials. And as soon as they get that okay, the emergency use authorization, all of these vaccines are going to be in mobile mode. And they've also identified in 2021, they'll have 1.3 billion doses. And that 50 million is inclusive of the 2 doses. Okay, so that's just something to notate. Again, the other thing I want to highlight, even when we get to this phase where, we have the efficacy, 90% is awesome. We never see that with the flu vaccine. That's the kind of efficacy we want to see if folks are going to be investing in getting a vaccine. We want it to be effective. The other thing that we need to be aware of is even with 90% efficacy, there's 10%. So, and this gets down to, virology, the study of viruses. We have our own DNA, we have our own genetics, we have our own, microcosm of our immune system. We'll talk a little bit more about this particular supplement I want to talk to you about today, but that plays a role in terms of that efficacy. And some folks might be preconditioned where it's just not as effective. Others might be really highly effective. That we need to get away from the fact of thinking that the vaccine is the end all be all, because it isn't. We need to follow suit and we need to have all the right protective measures. We need to be wearing our masks. We need to be social distancing. We need to be deploying the right, hand sanitizing and deploying the methods and the scientific research. We know that wearing certain types of masks, protecting our eyes, also having cleaner air quality is going to be a big factor. We have also other things I've highlighted to all of you and have posted down below a whole bunch of resources that you can equip in your homes, in your office spaces. But just know that, the idea of, this suddenly changing, how we approach it. once vaccines come out, it doesn't necessarily mean that like a Utah is going to get rid of their mask mandate. Until we get a real great handle and we drop our levels on a daily basis to like double digits, we're not going to see any major guidance changes. And as the Biden-Harris transition team rolls out, we'll get more, and I'll share with you more details about what to expect in January and the methodology. So that being said, this is the other thing that I read. So you guys know we have Gabriel, he's virtual learning here. We decided not to homeschool him. There's contractual issues with our school. So we kept him at the private school he's in. But it also saves his seat when things go back to normal, and he can still, he interfaces with his friends every day. And that was really important for us. This is really interesting. I read this article in one of my parenting, blurb things. It was research and a poll that looked at that a lot of parents are actually moving their kids out of public schooling and into the independent school world, private schools, where 6 out of 10 private schools are still in person. Part of it is they have better financing to make changes like the HVAC system. They can hire more teachers, and parents are leaning towards getting them into these different schools so that they could maintain their workload. I thought that was really interesting. And the poll, it was 6 in 10 of these schools have the option to be in person. A lot of them are hybrid, like what we are experiencing. But just only 5% of these independent schools have online only. So there's some degree of attraction to the in-person with kids. They're obviously with some of the private schools, they have smaller class sizes and all that stuff that's highly attractive too. So I wanted to highlight that for any of you families that might be thinking about that. There are a lot of people taking their kids from public to private. And they called it independent schools. Okay, so here's the other little very interesting piece of news. I don't have the research yet because it currently is underway, but I just caught wind that there is research happening right now. It's focusing in on the connection of COVID and chronic fatigue syndrome. This post-COVID effect, the post-COVID symptoms, the long hauler effect of COVID, what a lot of clinicians are seeing that deal with a lot of chronic fatigue syndrome is that there is this post-viral syndrome. We don't have a name for it yet, but they are drawing a lot of comparisons to the fact that it mirrors chronic fatigue syndrome. And this is really interesting because I've experienced this. I've been very transparent with you guys. I got into this field because in my early 20s, I had a very severe case of Epstein-Barr virus. It knocked me on my butt and I was really sick for a year and a half. And it took me years to recover. And I still experience, on occasion, if I overdo it, chronic fatigue syndrome. And this is very common with Epstein-Barr. It's also common with other viruses, Guillain-Barré and other viral invasions. Some affect the heart, some affect other organs and glandular impact. But one of the things that they've identified is these researchers they're researching the association of COVID with Epstein-Barr virus. And what they found is the post-viral syndrome for a lot of these patients is that 25% of them who have had COVID and have recovered, they're 25, a quarter, 1 in 4 of these individuals are so sick they still have to convalesce in bed. They're not able to get out and be active. Only 5% of the COVID patients have returned to pre-illness health. That's insane. And that's the thing that makes me nervous about this virus and why we continue, obviously with Brian and his autoimmunity, and he has no spleen. We're very, very cognizant and limited of our our coming and goings and our interaction. But that makes me very nervous for any of you who might, like myself, have had Epstein-Barr or have had some sort of chronic fatigue syndrome from a virus you've been exposed to. There could be a potential impact that if you got COVID, you might not get moderate or severely ill, but the side effects could exacerbate an already existing element or side effect that you had from something else. So this is really interesting. I don't have any dates on when this research is going to be finalized, but it is underway. And I will tell you, I still monitor all the communication from the long hauler community on Facebook. They've like doubled in size. There's just, you think about it, out of 10 million patients, just think about that economically and medically as well. We have 10 million individuals here in the US, over 10 million, who've had COVID. When we're looking at 25% of them have had or continue to have and experience symptoms where they're bedbound, that's a massive amount of people that are not 100%. So I just want to put that out there. I find that very, very interesting. I'm really excited that there's going to be that type of viral research and based on what we all already know. And there could very well be that some of the ways Epstein-Barr and some of these other viruses, they work in the same function or same facet. But this virus is so different that it might be a greater impact. So there'll be more details as that comes out. And you guys, for sure, you'll be aware of that as I get the detail. But today I want to talk to you about a significant synthesized hormone, a steroid that already exists in your body that might be in a deficient state that plays a significant role in your own immune health. It also is going to play a role in your hormone health, your neuroendocrine balance, your brain health, your digestive health. So for all of us in here with you, all of you here on the live and all of you watching on the replay, each and every one of you, this particular supplement, this hormone, this steroid is really critical to optimize. And I want to talk to you about vitamin D3. We know that vitamin D3, through multiple clinical research with COVID, vitamin D3, for folks that are in a moderate and severe category with COVID, they also have extreme vitamin D deficiencies. These folks are either in, single digit levels of vitamin D, or they're below 35 NG-IUs. And so that's the unit that we measure. For individuals that have deficiency, there's a direct impact on the immune state. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about this because I think I mentioned on Friday, on Thursday, I went for labs. I've had to find a new doctor. Our office, the Emory Clinic closed. It's near Gabriel School. So I just needed to go in for my normal wellness. So we did labs and I asked, I was like, hey, I want to make sure I get my vitamin D levels tested. So one of the things that you need to do is every 6 months, you need to be testing your vitamin D3 levels. And if you, are not going like I, did a virtual consult, I did my labs very quick in and out, and then I'm going to have another virtual conversation with that doctor. That's how we're all now operating. If you don't do that and you don't want to go in, you don't want to have, the whole rigmarole of like major blood draw, you can do a blood spot test. And this is, these are the kits that we sell here in the clinic. And so I want to talk first, because before we get into the details of vitamin D, you need to know where your levels are. And so I want to share with you basically how we test. We have two of these little things. These are the little diabetes pinprick test where you get like a little bit of a blood drop. And on this test paper, this is how this works. We have these little round circles, and you basically milk the area that you've pinpricked, and drops of blood go on the test paper. Vitamin D is a single test that we can run. We can run all different tests we call it blood spot. So it's literally a blood spot card. And you have this paper. This is a test paper that gets used in the lab. And through that blood spot collection, that's how we can evaluate your vitamin D levels. So if you haven't done that, do consider getting that. It's $99 to do the blood spot test. It's really inexpensive when it comes to testing. Labs are charging several $100s on the insurance side, but this gets mailed to you and you mail it to the lab. The lab itself sets you up as a patient in their profile. When the lab finishes the report, you get emailed that report. You go in, you can log into your HIPAA qualified online patient profile and download your report. Once you get an idea of where your vitamin D levels are, and there's a link if you want to buy this blood spot test, you can grab the link down below. I also have a free guide. So a lot of folks will buy the test kit or talk with their doctor, they get their labs ordered, and we do the blood spot test or we get their serum levels. And then you can download my free dosing guide. And it gives you where, if you're at like 38 or if you're at 45, this dosing guide is very specific in terms of the symptoms related to your deficiency. Ideally, as you'll see on the dosing guide, 85 to 100 in the unity, the quantity, the units that you get evaluated. We want to be at 85 to 100 on vitamin D3 levels. When we are below even 60, you're going to see symptoms of deficiency. And that gives you a better idea also, corresponds to how do you dose to get up to those levels. And dosing vitamin D is one of these things where it is a slow process. Every cell in our body is receptive. It has receptivity to vitamin D. And that receptivity is just an indicator of how important this particular hormone is. It's a steroidal-based hormone. It is stored, it can be stored in your fat cells. But honestly, when you take a dose of like a vitamin D, I talked about this the other day, but this is like my vitamin D. It's a small little capsule, but this happens to be a 50,000 IU dose. Every cell in your body, they're like piranhas. Like every cell needs vitamin D and they metabolize it very quickly. So to achieve optimal levels, you have to first nourish all the cells, get them all daily getting what they require, and then you start to increase your level. So some folks, it takes 6 months. Some folks, it takes a year. It took me a year and a half to get my levels up to optimized. And I'm on the higher end of optimized. I'm very happy with that. But one of the things that is really critical that I want to talk to you about today is there's a direct function and a modulation and a regulation of your immune system that vitamin D3 plays. It specifically triggers what we call, I wrote this down, I want to make sure I got it, innate and adaptive immune responses. So we have an innate, natural, kind of functional immune system. The vitamin D supports your innate function, and then it supports your adaptive function. We have two parts of our immune system. The adaptive part is the immune system that will see a pathogen, a virus, a bacteria, foreign invader coming into the body, and all of a sudden it triggers, boom, we've got a foreign enemy, and we have this immune response. Well, that regulation, that adaptive immune system, is where the vitamin D comes into play. Vitamin D, if you are in deficiency, you don't have this activated. But if you are optimized, your vitamin D will trigger what we call our T cell cytokines. These are protective, are kind of attack mode, antiviral, antimicrobial, antipathogenic immune response mechanism. And the other thing that happens, which is really critical when we get into like gene testing, some folks have genetic defects or they have gene mutations. And sometimes that affects both the innate and adaptive immune response. What we see is when we are optimized in vitamin D3, that genetic expression of our immune system is actually able to be triggered and turned on. So a lot of times you are going to find that if you've noticed you're more susceptible to illness, you've noticed you have bacterial invasions. This could be candida, it could be yeast, it could be fungus on your nails, it could be digestive grievances, IBS, it could be neuroendocrine, it could be things like depression. And we're approaching the time of seasonal affective disorder or seasonal depression. It's going to be heightened because of COVID. Vitamin D plays a critical role in that balance. We also see other things where your hormone balance, we need vitamin D3 as one of the fat-soluble steroids that triggers male and female reproductive balance. So when women have menstrual irregularities, they have breast tissue irregularities, they have uterine irregularities, men that might have prostate cell irregularities, vitamin D is really critical to turning on the innate and the adaptive processes for your body's immune system to be optimized. So when we're looking at, we have a global pathogen. We have a global pandemic, a virus, the SARS-CoV-2. When this is something that we're all combating and trying to minimize our exposure, and we're trying to support our body and its natural function to be able to fight a moderate to severe case of this, vitamin D is going to be really critical in that process. We already know through scientific data that deficiencies are common, and like categorically, moderate and severe cases, they always have vitamin D deficiency. And there's a reason for that, because of the innate and adaptive immune function is dysregulated. So when we have vitamin D deficiencies, you have a dysregulated immune response to COVID. You have a dysregulated immune response to cancer cells. You have a dysregulated immune response to yeast and candida. You have a dysregulated response to colds and flu. You have basically if you think about it, when we think about defense mechanisms, you have no army that is ready and immediately able to address an attacker. So it becomes really critical when you're thinking about, how do I support my immune system? If you are doing astragalus and you're adding adaptogenic herbs, and you're doing functional medicine, functional mushrooms, and maybe you're doing colostrum therapy, like I've highlighted quite a bit, and you're doing all these things, which are highly beneficial, but you don't have, one, you don't know your vitamin D levels. Two, because you don't know them, you don't know if maybe you're taking vitamin D, you're taking the right dosing. And then if you are in a deficient state, if you have gotten tested, or, it's an unknown, you might be in a deficient state and unknowingly walking around with a dysregulated immune system. So there's this threefold approach. First, you want to get tested. Talk with your doctor, or if you don't feel comfortable, doing that, going into a lab, I totally get it. You can do a blood spot test, and I think I put it back, but this is you do the little diabetic pinprick, and have little blood spots. You fill these tests, and the lab will get you your vitamin D levels. From there, you download my free dosing guide, links down below. That'll tell you where that range is. And let's talk about some of the symptoms of low or deficient vitamin D levels. And this is really critical, because I know a lot of you write to me, and even in the live chat, by the way, the live chat is on. And if you're loving this content, I see we have probably the most people we've had on in a while. Please give me a thumbs up and hit that share button. I really appreciate that. So some symptoms. Fatigue is a big one. Lack of attention, brain fog. Friends, brain fog is really, really common with D deficiencies. The other thing is sleep dysregulation. So you might be noticing that you're tired but wired. You don't sleep well. You have insomnia. You might be waking up throughout the middle of the night at all times. It doesn't have to be at that 1 to 3 a.m. time frame. You might also notice you have challenges concentrating, memory challenges. Digestively, you might have imbalances where you have IBS. You might have early stages of Crohn's or colitis. You might also experience cramping or weakening of the lining of the intestinal tract. Also, folks that have gastrointestinal upper GI imbalances within the stomach lining, they might have Barrett's esophagus. I was just speaking with one of our followers about that this weekend. Hormonal imbalances are really big for a lot of, especially like teens. I will find that when we dose our teens appropriately to vitamin D, we get them tested, we start to dose them, a lot of those early stage premenstrual imbalances get eradicated. Vitamin D is a real big underlying foundational precursor to the manufacturing of our estrogen, our progesterone, and our testosterone levels. Now, as we age as women and men, we have different things that affect our hormones. I talk a lot about stress. Stress is a big one. We'll see stress leaching testosterone and progesterone levels, as well as decreasing our estrogen levels. that then gets exacerbated if you don't have the building blocks for those nutrients. So you can have both stress hormone playing a role and a D deficiency, and that is the marriage that really keeps your estrogen and progesterone levels low. It decreases your testosterone. We see that really commonly in men. And I have men in their late 30s that we're now testing and seeing that they have low T. So that in and of itself can help balance irregularities in the male and female hormones. We also will see where infertility, a lot of women that have miscarriages or uterine, a thickening of the uterine lining, vitamin D is really critical for manufacturing those hormones that are going to balance out the estrogen progesterone ratio. Also for kids, there's a lot of kids that get diagnosed with ADD, ADHD, OCD, and various kind of attention disorders, as well as sensory disorders. Vitamin D dosing is really critical. And it's most important when we are pre-pregnancy to get optimized. Then we need more D when we are pregnant. And then if we breastfeed, we need even more. And that latter phase was where I saw in my own body a decrease. I went into a deficient state with breastfeeding. And so that is something as women, when we're breastfeeding, we're passing on D through breast milk. It is fat soluble. That's why you'll see a lot of milk on the, if you're drinking milk, I'm not a big fan of it, but we do see fortified nut milks as well, where they'll add vitamin D to it. So that is something to consider, that if you're in that phase of life and you're raising kids or you're pregnant or thinking about becoming pregnant, get your vitamin Ds optimized. Then as we approach perimenopause and andropause in the male category, we'll see stress being a factor. We see neuroendocrine stressors. We see biological stressors, physiological stressors, chemical stressors, all decrease the vitamin D. And there's a direct link between your D levels, stress, and the state of your liver. Where our body is synthesizing vitamin D is in our liver. That organ is a critical organ for that manufacturing and the synthesis process. And if you experience elevations in your liver enzymes, have high triglyceride levels and high the unhealthy cholesterol levels, that'll be indicative that your liver needs a detox. You need to cleanse and clear out your liver. I spoke about this on Friday's show. But you're also going to need to assess your vitamin D, because if you've got a bogged down, dysfunctional organ, and it's a gland, the liver is a gland, it's manufacturing hormones. If that is not optimized, you're going to see naturally deficiencies. So there's a lot of things that will be prominent. So I'm seeing, let me see, I think I saw somebody say that there's, let me go to YouTube. Somebody's saying that there isn't the dosing guide link, but let me just make sure I can add that now. Okay, so I'm curious, and comment down below in the live chat and on the replay. Comment in the comment box below. Let me know, when is the last time you had your vitamin D tested? And if it was not within the last 6 months, it's time. It's time for you to get that test. The other thing that, let me just edit. I'm going to edit. The dosing guide. Okay. Let's see, save. Okay, the dosing guide is in there, guys. I just added it. Okay, so it becomes really critical that you get those levels evaluated. And Sybil said, it's been a long time. Bethy, never have. Yes, do make a plan. If you need something quick and easy, I've got 40 or 50 of these kits right now. I can get out to you guys today. It's really important to know your levels. It is not helpful if you don't know your level and you're taking 5,000 IUs, and you need to be really taking 25 or even higher. I've been interviewed recently about seasonal affective disorder and vitamin D. There's a huge link between seasonal depression and vitamin D levels. And when folks fall in that category of having seasonal affective disorder, we actually increase their doses to 100,000 IUs of D a day. And that's a clinical recommendation. So if you don't know where you're at, and you might be a single digit or in the teens, and you need to be up to 85 or 90, there's a big gap. And that gap can be where a lot of the symptoms and experiences things that you experience on a daily basis. Now, the other thing that is a huge factor, and this is what we associate vitamin D dosing more with, is the remineralization of our bones. It has a core function in the state of our bone health, and the ability to deliver minerals and nutrients to rebuild our bone. When women and men get diagnosed through DEXA scans or breakage of bones, easily breakage, we find that they have early stages of osteopenia, or they may have osteoporosis. Vitamin D supplementation is the best and easiest way to offset the demineralization of your bones, and that includes your teeth. And so if you have had experiences where you've had dental caries, or noticed that your teeth just are not remineralizing, that is something you might want to consider getting tested and taking a look at. Let's see. Debbie Marshall says, my PCP checks annually. I'd be making sure you're doing it six times, twice a year, every 6 months. She says, I'm affected by SAD. And so a lot of times the research is out there. I am not highlighting anything that is not known or posted online in medical journals. A lot of times we get, kind of in the zone, and people just go through the same thing over and over in the clinical category. But it's really important to assess and understand that, clinically speaking, SAD, seasonal affective disorder, we need to sometimes double that daily dosage. Let's see, Sybil, do our kits tell people how much to take if they are low? No, my kits, this simply gives you, this is a test. So it gives you the value. The free guide that I've linked to in the description box below, gives you a dosing guide. That's what I've created for my patients. It is a functional medicine guide, and it's free for you. So definitely do check that out. Dan says, I suffer from chronic positive thinking. Oh, I love it. Yay. Positive thoughts. It's very good to have. Kimberly Renee says, oh, I missed Friday. I need to watch it. I was diagnosed with a fatty liver. I may have only 1 to 2 alcoholic drinks a year. So yeah, Kimberly is highlighting something that's really common. It is not uncommon to get diagnosed with sclerosis of the liver. That's a fatty liver. The things behind that are the core hormones that are a factor in that are cortisol levels and insulin levels. When our body has too much or excesses of insulin, you might be insulin or glucose, insulin resistance, glucose intolerance, we spoke about that last week, and or you are highly stressed out and you are chronically producing excessive levels of cortisol. Those two hormones, insulin and cortisol, actually get stored and clogs up the cells of your liver. I always kind of tell my patients when we talk about their liver health, I look at I think in my head, the liver itself, each cell is like a little storage container. And it's like the container store for your organs or glands. And each little container, each little cell will hold hormones, it'll hold fat, it'll hold, so fat meaning cholesterol, triglycerides. It just holds all these different things. And it is the grand filter. It is clearing and cleansing out our blood. What you have to do is you have to take steps to help your body detox. Sometimes we need to reevaluate what's in our skin care, what is in our body care, what's in our water. Are you drinking the cleanest water? Are you filtering out chloramines and other, harmful chemicals that get overwhelmed or can overwhelm the liver? Are you also dealing with maybe some pharmaceuticals, and you need to support your liver by adding dandelion and milk thistle to the plan? Those are all going to be helpful in helping the liver rebalance, recalibrate, and then synthesize and manufacture hormones better. And the other thing that I do want to share, don't give up faith and hope on your liver. So I'm going to share Dan K's chronic positive thinking here. Your liver is an amazing organ. And you can actually have 90% of that organ completely eradicated. It can be cut out, removed, damaged, and that 10% will regrow itself. It is one of the most rejuvenating, regenerating organ glands in our body. And there's no sort of question as to why that's so important. There's so much involved in the liver's process that it needs to be restorative. It needs to be rejuvenative. And if you give it all the right materials and tools to rejuvenate and heal, it'll respond really amazingly well. I see somebody has, it asked, David says, is milk thistle good for a liver with hep C? I have healed patients, helped them heal hepatitis C. They've been, looked at, the infusions, and they've, the different kind of really intense medicinal or medical procedures. They've actually been able to avoid that through really intense dosing. I have certain protocols that I'll put patients on with hep C, and we've been able to get rid of it. And so the liver can heal very, very well. And it can be a long-term healing. You just need to do all the right things to do so. And I have some content on here. But Dan K says, does fasting cure fatty liver? No, it doesn't. You actually need to do more things than that. Fasting is not going to clear up and eradicate a lot of the synthesis and the processes that have melted down. Fasting won't necessarily eradicate like a bile duct stone. And it's not uncommon for people to get a bile duct stone. We might even see some pancreatic imbalances in there. The one thing that fasting, depending on the type of fasting, keto, we do see some growth hormone get impacted there. And we might even see some increases in glutathione, depending on kind of the approach. But to be honest with you, I have a lot of different kind of methods and approaches that I take with healing the liver. Every case is obviously very different. Everybody's body is different. Everybody's biological microcosm inside their body is going to be unique, and we need to approach it that way. Dwayne says, such good news for people. Yes. Let's see. Sybil, it's very individual. And so that is something where I would take patients on and really work individually with them. All right. So Bethy says, I take a bile replacement as I don't have a gallbladder. Yeah. Bile salts is really great for that. Yeah, I need to do some edited video on the liver. I love the liver. The liver's awesome. And you guys know I talked about it Friday. If you weren't on Friday's show, definitely do check out Friday's show. Friday's show was a Q&A. I took Wednesday off. Monday, check out Monday's show. I think you'll find Monday's show quite impactful. Okay, so Babu says, does a fatty or sick liver cause high insulin and cortisol? It's actually the opposite. High insulin and high cortisol causes the fatty liver. Because that's where it gets stored. So let's just recap. Most important nutrient in this important time of keeping your immune system modulated, regulated, and ready to address any pathogen, any viral or bacterial invasion is vitamin D3. That form, vitamin D3, is what you want to look at assessing. So get your blood tests, call your doctors, get labs run. If you don't want to do that, I have these here. You don't need a script with me. You just go online. I have a link down below. These are $99. We ship that to you in the mail, and you do your blood spot at home. We used to do these in the clinic. So there's a lot of tests that we'd have in clinic, but now we can mail it to you. The other thing, that once you get your values, then I have a dosing guide. It's free for all of you. But it is a guideline, a way to help you figure out what dose do you need. Is 5K good enough? Most of the time it's not, to be honest with you. And that is the one thing when I first started working with folks one-on-one, it was really hard to find vitamin D at the levels I needed people to take. And I also had retail when I opened up my own clinic in Florida. And, the most I could get would be 800 IUs. And I would be like, you need to take half this bottle to get the dosing on a daily basis. And it's really come a far way. We've had a lot of clinical research in the last 15 years that has highlighted the need for manufacturers to put out more. We used to have infusions and injections of D and, shots and things like that. And then we started seeing the higher doses. So this is one of the highest doses. It's 50,000 IUs. But, depending on where your level is, then you can appropriately dose. But you have to know your level. And that is one thing. Don't guess, friends. It is too important right now. If you are, trying to keep you and your families healthy and safe, get the whole entire family tested. Children as well. It's really important that we understand vitamin D levels for kids, especially if your kids, maybe they're on the spectrum. Maybe they've got ADD or ADHD symptoms. Maybe they are also showcasing some tendencies where they have an inability to focus, concentrate. Maybe they're a little depressed. And that is also something that when we're also dealing with an impending winter is coming type of situation, it's getting cooler, although we've had beautiful weather. This whole weekend was gorgeous. And I have got about a week until I have to cut all my roses back. If I start cutting them now, they'll start regrowing. So, but it's been really nice. But there will be cooler, colder temps. I've had some friends and some of you who've already had your first snowfall. As we get into the darker days, and we're going to be approaching that here in December and January, it's darker, it's cold, cooler. People are less apt to be outside. And the kind of natural approach for our body to synthesize D is through the sun. And there's this whole kind of process. It has to be all right. You have to have your retina has to be exposed, your skin has to be exposed, cholesterol rises to the surface, it absorbs and then synthesizes through the liver. And that's like a really brief explanation. We lack that. And with COVID, people are going to be more isolated. A lot of you, like us, have changed our Thanksgiving plans. Christmas is not going to be what it looks like. And that alone will cause you to need more D. If you are on the verge of feeling anxious or depressed, please test your D. D is really critical for depression. And we're talking mild, moderate, and chronic depression. Vitamin D levels are going to be low in those categories. Now, the other thing that I need to put together that I haven't done so I just have to clarify this. There's also, if you are taking certain pharmaceuticals, that can leach vitamin D. Sometimes that needs more functionality of vitamin D than what your body's able to deliver and use to modulate and support the innate and active immune response. So I do want to highlight that. At some point, I do want to have kind of a chart that if you are taking, an antidepressant, or maybe you're on cholesterol medication or whatnot, just how those alone impact your vitamin D. And that's something that we as functional medicine providers and naturopaths, I have a chart that I'll reference when I'm prepping for an intake, and I have a patient that's listed 6 medicines. They're on 6 pharmaceuticals. And, I'm going to look at what kind of common deficiencies or nutrients are getting depleted because of that pharmaceutical. And that's something to just be aware of. Okay. So, let's see. Kimberly says she had fibroid embolization in your 30s. Haven't had a menstrual cycle. Okay. You had labs. Oh, okay. Yeah. So definitely do download that guide, Kimberly, when you get your labs back. And I just have to say this too, you guys will laugh. So, I'm in this field, we do testing. A lot of times I'll test myself. I just I needed to get this new doctor all sorted. So I have this great conversation. She's like, oh, you're a naturopath. So, he's got some Ayurvedic traditions and is way more kind of inclusive of natural medicine. But I told him what I wanted tested. And so when I saw the labs pop up in our patient portal, the line items were missing. And so I had to send him a message on Friday. I'm like, I want to see blah, 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 blah. So make sure you ask specifically and get that. And I made a mistake when I sat to get my labs. I didn't ask her to read through, and now we're not, sheets of paper. There's really minimal interaction happening when you're going in a clinical setting now. So I had to double check, and I had to not only just ask for or tell them what I wanted, I had to reaffirm that what I asked for was not written on the lab. And so, do follow up on that category. My whole thing is I hate giving blood draws. And so if I'm going to do it, I want you to do everything and then some. So just make sure you ask. You have to be your best advocate, friends. That is always going to be one of the things that I recommend. Okay, so I've got to run. It's been an hour. I'm so grateful for all of you taking time to join me today. I hope you found this helpful. If you have, please give me a thumbs up. Please hit that share button. Share to Twitter, share to Facebook, Instagram. I'm hoping this comes through on Instagram. I've been having some issues with my Instagram picking up our live show, but this week is I'm trying to work out scheduling, so stay tuned. I might be opening up my schedule for seeing patients more frequently in a virtual setting. So we'll start doing telemed health appointments for new patients, and I'm excited. So stay tuned. I hope you guys all have a great day. Please comment on the video when it gets all wrapped up, and definitely do check out the downloads. Full script, I have all different vitamin D categories. Xalar is one of my favorite brands, really high quality, very bioavailable. So awesome. Thanks for joining me today. Happy Monday. And stay tuned. We'll have our show on Wednesday. All right, you guys, I'll see you then. And thanks to Ron and Pat. I am grateful for your time. Bye, everybody.